notifying John Deere right now, if you do that, we're putting a 200% tariff on everything that you want to sell into the United States.
In a whirlwind moment that sent shockwaves across the American heartland, one of the nation's most iconic symbols of agriculture, John Deere, made a decision that would forever alter the landscape of U.S. farming and manufacturing. For nearly 2 centuries, John Deere stood not only as a manufacturer of robust, reliable farm equipment, but also as a beacon of American ingenuity and resilience. Founded in 1837, the company had long symbolized progress in rural America, nurturing communities from the smallest towns to expansive farmlands. However, in a controversial shift this year, John Deere announced the closure of multiple U.S. factories and the relocation of its production lines to Mexico. This transformation, aimed at reducing operational costs, boosting shareholder returns, and competing on a global scale, has ignited fierce debates, economic hardship, and political backlash, from the fields of Iowa and Nebraska to the corridors of power in Washington. John Deere's move to shift production overseas is emblematic of a broader transformation occurring within global manufacturing industries. For generations, American-made machinery represented far more than just tools for farming. They embodied local pride, community stability, and a legacy of hard work. The decision to relocate production was driven by an intense pressure to remain competitive in an increasingly globalized world, as companies seek to cut costs in the face of rising domestic labor expenses. In the U.S., labor costs have long been significantly higher than in countries like Mexico, where production can be maintained at a fraction of the expense. The decision was not made lightly. Executives argued that staying competitive in emerging global markets, ranging from Brazil and India to parts of Europe, demanded a nimble, cost-effective strategy. Yet, while this move promised increased profits for shareholders and the possibility of new growth in international markets, it came at a hefty price for domestic communities. Over 7,000 workers were suddenly out of a job in just the first quarter following the announcement. Small towns, whose entire economies had revolved around the steady hum of John Deere factories, saw their lifeblood, local commerce, begin to wither almost overnight. Imagine a town where generations of families once depended on the steady income provided by a local factory. A town where the familiar green logo of John Deere was painted on barns, trucks, and signs, serving as a proud emblem of local industry and hard work. With the sudden relocation of the production lines, these communities found themselves grappling with rapid economic decline. Diners, repair shops, and other small businesses that thrived on the daily patronage of factory workers now faced dwindling foot traffic and reduced incomes. The shutdown of these factories wasn't merely about job losses. It was a blow to the very fabric of rural America. It affected the community's identity, its social structures, and the intergenerational trust that had built up around a once thriving industry. The local economies that had enjoyed decades of stability were now forced to confront an uncertain future, grappling with unemployment and the collapse of ancillary businesses. In many rural areas, this economic contraction has sparked fears of a new kind of recession, one that echoes the devastating downturns of the past. The ripple effects of John Deere's decision soon caught the attention of former President Donald Trump, a staunch supporter of the America First policy. Trump, known for his blunt and often unpredictable commentary regarding trade and manufacturing, reacted with immediate fury, channeling his fervor for protecting American jobs and punishing companies that move jobs overseas. He threatened to impose an unprecedented 200% tariff on John Deere products manufactured in Mexico. Trump's rhetoric was clear and uncompromising. He framed this move as a betrayal to his core constituency, rural voters who had placed their trust in both his vision and in American-made labor. His speeches, punctuated by forceful warnings and bold promises, portrayed any company daring to relocate production as a direct enemy of American prosperity. At first glance, such measures might have seemed like a robust defense of American manufacturing. However, the imposition of a 200% tariff had immediate, counterproductive effects. The price of a John Deere tractor, a machine once typically valued at around $60,000, soared to over $100,000 within mere months. For farmers already grappling with increasing financial pressures, this dramatic price hike was nothing short of catastrophic. The higher costs not only placed an unbearable strain on their budgets, but also threatened the viability of their operations. In a sector where margins can be razor-thin and profits hard-won, these extra costs translated directly into lost harvests, mounting debts, and an uncertain economic future. For many farmers, John Deere wasn't simply a brand. It was a trusted partner in their day-to-day battles against unpredictable weather, fluctuating market prices, and rising production challenges. The green logo had stood as a proud symbol of American quality and durability, representing a deep-seated commitment to locally made and reliable equipment. When John Deere chose profit over loyalty, many felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. In key farming states such as Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, the reaction was swift and decisive. Rather than mounting mass protests, farmers quietly began to pivot towards alternative equipment brands. Companies like Kubota, AGCO, and Case IH, known for their customer-friendly policies, more flexible repair systems, and lesser reliance on restrictive software controls, suddenly found themselves in a position of newfound prominence. This switch wasn't simply a matter of preference. It was a strategic decision aimed at curbing costs and ensuring against unreliable service and support. Dealerships that had once enjoyed robust sales saw a precipitous decline, some experiencing drops of up to 40% in customer traffic and sales figures. The absence of the green logo on barns and farm machinery became a visible sign of this shift, symbolizing a broader realignment in the market. The boycott of John Deere wasn't just about protest. It was about a deep-seated desire to reclaim the values of American manufacturing and support products that were truly made for the American farmer, rather than as mere components in a global profit game. While the struggle within the agriculture sector rapidly captured public attention, John Deere's decision to relocate production was symptomatic of larger trends affecting the entire U.S. economy. Beyond the farmlands, industries across America began to feel the impact of aggressive protectionist policies and the unintended consequences of high tariffs imposed on imported goods. The auto industry, for instance, found itself grappling with a cascade of retaliatory measures from international markets. In a series of rapid shifts reminiscent of a high-stakes chess match, American automakers faced steep price hikes and plummeting sales. Trump's insistence on protectionist measures, propagated by the threat of tariffs that reached up to 200% in some cases, created an atmosphere of uncertainty among domestic manufacturers. The repercussions were immediate. Car prices surged dramatically, with some models experiencing increases of $15,000 to $30,000 in just 1 month. This wasn't an isolated phenomenon. The broader message resonated across multiple industries, from automotive to aviation. The auto industry, traditionally one of the pillars of American economic strength, soon found itself ensnared in a complex web of retaliatory tariffs and market realignments. While Trump's policies were ostensibly designed to safeguard American manufacturing, the imposition of heavy tariffs on imported auto parts and vehicles had a cascading effect on production and consumer prices. As production costs escalated, many automakers were compelled to reevaluate their supply chains, with some even opting to shift production overseas to remain competitive. This shift had profound consequences for American workers. Job losses began to mount as auto factories across Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee, States where the auto industry has long contributed to regional identity and economic vigor were forced to scale back or close altogether. In a particularly stark illustration of the unfolding crisis, estimates suggest that 200,000 jobs were lost within a matter of weeks, with the resulting unemployment casting a long shadow over communities that had relied on the industry for decades. Consumers, too, paid a heavy price. Rising production costs and the imposition of hefty tariffs culminated in dramatic price increases for new vehicles. High tariffs meant that American-made cars, once known for their competitive pricing, quickly became cost-prohibitive, driving potential buyers towards overseas competitors. The ripple effects extended beyond the auto dealerships. Local parts suppliers, regional repair shops, and related service industries found themselves facing a sudden drop in demand, a decline that reverberated through the entire ecosystem of American manufacturing. The ramifications of these protectionist policies extended well beyond American borders. As the U.S. ramped up tariffs on imported goods, international partners retaliated in kind. European nations, in particular, started to impose severe restrictions on U.S. exports. The auto industry felt these shocks most acutely, with key markets in the European Union, home to over 440 million consumers, closing their doors to electric and fuel-efficient vehicles manufactured in the United States. This created a knock-on effect, precipitating a sharp decline in market share that many U.S. companies had come to rely on. Canada, a close economic partner and neighbor, also joined forces with the EU by signing new trade partnerships that made exporting American-made goods ever more challenging. The Green Technology Access Partnership Agreement, for instance, tightened the regulatory framework, further limiting the flow of American auto exports and exacerbating the industry's woes. Meanwhile, global competitors like Japan seized the opportunity to tighten their grip on the U.S. market. Japanese automakers, renowned for their reliability, fuel efficiency, and advanced manufacturing techniques, made significant investments in trade protection and production technology. Rather than engaging in overt confrontation or loud public battles, they quietly adjusted their strategies, investing billions in modernizing production lines, exploring alternative energy sources, and expanding their footprint in key international markets. As a result, even as U.S. companies struggled to adapt to high tariffs and volatile market conditions, Japanese brands solidified their reputation, ensuring that consumer loyalty would ultimately shift away from traditional American manufacturers. The domino effect of these protectionist measures did not spare even the aviation industry, a critical sector tightly woven into the fabric of the U.S. economy. Major aerospace companies, such as Boeing, found themselves facing a dual challenge: a loss in international contracts and increasing pressure from retaliatory measures imposed by key markets like China and the EU. With Boeing's order book containing thousands of aircraft earmarked for international buyers, reduced exports signaled a potential crisis of unprecedented scale. In one particularly alarming scenario, estimation figures suggested that if these trends continued unchecked, Boeing could face losses measured in the tens of billions of dollars. And it wasn't just Boeing that was at risk. The potential downfall of such a major player would send shockwaves through extensive domestic supply chains, impacting hundreds of subcontractors and smaller suppliers, each an integral part of the broader industrial ecosystem. The resulting job cuts and factory closures would not only destabilize the aviation industry, but could also precipitate far-reaching economic repercussions across multiple states. At the heart of these intertwined crises lies a fundamental policy debate. Can protectionism, embodied in high tariffs and stringent trade regulations, truly safeguard domestic industries? Or does it, in fact, sow the seeds of long-term economic decline? Advocates of protectionist policies argue that measures such as the 200% tariff on John Deere products from Mexico serve as a necessary deterrent against the outsourcing of American jobs. They maintain that imposing steep tariff should force companies to reconsider their production strategies, thereby keeping jobs and economic activity within the United States. Yet the unfolding reality suggests a much more complex picture. Instead of reinforcing domestic manufacturing, these policies have, in several cases, driven companies further away, compelling them to realign their production strategies around lower-cost international operations. The direct consequences have been stark: skyrocketing consumer prices in both agriculture and automotive sectors, widespread job losses, and a precipitous decline in local economic stability. The paradox is that, in attempting to insulate the U.S. economy from global competition, protectionist measures may inadvertently render American companies less competitive on the world stage. Key factors need to be addressed if the United States is to reclaim and revitalize its position in global manufacturing. Experts suggest that the federal government must step in to increase credit and subsidy support for small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly those in traditional industries facing near-term existential threats. There's a growing consensus that investing in modern production techniques, robust domestic supply chains, and comprehensive trade policies that emphasize sustainability and strategic partnerships is essential. Without these measures, the United States risks continuing down a path of economic isolation, wherein companies are forced to rely increasingly on foreign production despite ostensibly being American-made. In the end, the fallout from these sweeping protectionist policies isn't limited to industrial balance sheets or trade deficits. It is ultimately the American consumer who bears the brunt of the consequences. As tractors become prohibitively expensive, automobiles climb in price due to heavy tariffs, and agricultural commodities face destabilized markets, everyday individuals find themselves confronting rising living costs without the benefit of proportionate wage increases. When food prices rise because production costs have escalated, or when essential items become cost-prohibitive due to a collapse in supply chains, the ramifications are felt most acutely by low-income families who have little room to absorb such shocks. The human element of these economic shifts is too often lost in the glare of political debates and trade statistics. For millions of American workers, from the farmers tending their fields to the factory employees assembling vehicles and aircraft components, the real price of protectionism is measured in lost jobs, decreased quality of life, and an uncertain future for the communities they call home. In this context, the moving of production lines overseas by an iconic company like John Deere isn't just a business decision. It's a cultural and social rupture that threatens the stability of entire regions. The current standoff represents more than just a clash of corporate strategy versus governmental intervention. It is a vivid illustration of the global leverage game, where economic power and political will collide. With international partners such as the EU, China, Canada, and Japan all maneuvering to fortify their own industries against U.S. protectionism, the American economy finds itself increasingly in a position of vulnerability. Trade partnerships that once fostered economic growth and mutual prosperity are now being reconfigured and tightened, leaving U.S. companies isolated and less able to adapt to rapidly shifting global standards. It is clear that unless the United States makes significant policy adjustments, the country risks a long-term decline in its global market share. American companies, once the standard-bearers of quality and reliability, may be forced to compete in markets where foreign governments provide stronger subsidies and where modern mechanization reigns supreme. As emerging markets continue to demand advanced, cost-effective machinery, from automated tractors to AI-powered harvesters, the U.S. faces the stark reality that clinging to outdated economic models will only hasten its descent from global leadership. Amidst these debates, a critical question looms. Can America strike a balance between nurturing domestic innovation and engaging fully with the global marketplace? The answer, experts suggest, may lie in adopting a more nuanced approach to trade policy, an approach that places equal emphasis on upgrading domestic production capabilities, investing in new technologies, and forging strategic international partnerships. For instance, investments in advanced agriculture technologies, such as GPS-controlled tractors, AI-powered drones, and automation systems, may help mitigate rising production costs without compromising the competitive edge of American companies. Similarly, in the auto industry, a shift towards more sustainable practices, such as modernizing production lines for electric vehicles, could pave the way for American manufacturers to reclaim lost market share. However, these transitions require substantial government support in the form of incentives, subsidies, and trade agreements that are not solely built on punitive tariffs, but are rather collaborative in nature. Only by addressing both the costs of innovation and the realities of global competition can the United States hope to rebuild industries that have long been considered the backbone of its economy. The controversies swirling around John Deere's decision to relocate production and Trump's aggressive tariff threats underscore a pivotal moment in American industrial history. Deeply intertwined with the nation's cultural identity and the livelihoods of millions, these developments reveal the broader challenges facing an economy in flux. It is a story of a nation trying to reinvent itself in a rapidly changing global environment, a landscape where traditional notions of American-made are being reshaped by economic imperatives and geopolitical realities. For rural communities whose identity has long been rooted in locally manufactured equipment, the loss of a once ubiquitous symbol like John Deere is not just an economic setback, it is a cultural wound. Meanwhile, for the vast network of workers in manufacturing, transportation, and related sectors, the ramifications of these policies are painfully tangible. Job losses, reduced incomes, and a growing sense of vulnerability in the face of shifting economic tides. In this era of dramatic change, the debate over protectionism versus global engagement is more relevant than ever. The experience of John Deere and the ensuing political and economic battles offer a cautionary tale. While high tariffs and aggressive trade policies may offer the illusion of immediate protection, they can also unleash unforeseen negative consequences, raising prices, undermining consumer confidence, and eroding the very foundation of the nation's competitive edge. Looking ahead, the future of American industries may well depend on a recalibration of priorities. Policymakers and business leaders must work hand in hand to craft solutions that support innovation, protect worker livelihoods, and nurture the domestic economy, while simultaneously embracing the practical realities of global trade. Whether it is through increased federal subsidies for small and medium enterprises, strategic investments in advanced technology, or the forging of new trade agreements that encourage mutual growth, the path forward demands careful planning and bold leadership. Ultimately, the saga of John Deere, Trump's tariff war, and the shifting dynamics of both the agriculture and auto industries paints a picture of an economy at a crossroads. One possible path leads to isolation and stagnation, a retreat into outdated protectionist policies that further alienate domestic consumers and workers. The alternative, a path marked by innovation, strategic international cooperation, and reformed trade policies, offers the hope of an American renaissance in manufacturing and technology. This turning point is not merely about balancing books or boosting shareholder profits. It is about preserving the cultural and economic fabric of the nation. As American consumers begin to feel the pinch at the pump, at the market, and at the dinner table, the need for a coherent, forward-thinking policy becomes all the more urgent. The coming years will likely reveal whether the United States can recalibrate its economic strategies in time, transforming a moment of crisis into an opportunity for reinvention, and securing a future where both industries and communities can once again thrive. In essence, this multifaceted conflict encapsulates the broader global struggle for economic power and technological superiority. It is a reminder that behind every policy debate are real people, farmers, factory workers, and consumers, whose lives and livelihoods hang in the balance. As we continue to witness dramatic shifts in global trade and manufacturing, the choices made today will shape the economic destiny of tomorrow. The challenge for America is clear: to rise above short-term political posturing and create a sustainable, inclusive economy that honors the legacy of its past while boldly stepping into the future. By embracing a comprehensive strategy that addresses both the need for competitive innovation and the protection of domestic industries, the United States can potentially transform this volatile period into a renaissance of American craftsmanship and ingenuity. The narrative unfolding in the fields of rural America and the sprawling factory floors of the auto industry is a testament to resilience, a call to action for policymakers, businesses, and consumers alike to ensure that the spirit of American manufacturing endures in the face of global challenges. As this compelling saga continues, one thing remains certain: the decisions made now will reverberate across generations, defining not only the future of American industry, but also the very character of a nation determined to reclaim its place in the global hierarchy.